Welcome to the Friday Happy Hour with victory strategist, award-winning author and your happy hour host, Annmarie Kelly. Each week, Annmarie chats with women who have reinvented, started over or wrote fabulous next chapters. They share how they overcame their midlife challenges and how you can too. So kick back with some good happy hour something to drink and enjoy today's show.
You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour with me, Annmarie Kelly. I'm that recovering good girl and your victorious woman empowerment partner. And this is where us victory chicks and you men who care about us meet on Fridays to chat about things we can do to overcome our challenges, get empowered, and make our lives sparkle. So thanks for coming to Happy Hour today. Listen, do you have somebody in your life who just rankles you on a regular basis? Maybe it's somebody at work. Or your neighbor, or and you try to avoid him or her, or maybe you live with that difficult person. Well, today's guest is Sarah Elliston, and she is that difficult person, or at least she was. She says she's in recovery, and she's joining us for today's happy hour to see how she can help you understand and deal with the difficult person in your life. That'd be good. Make your life easier, right? There's a sign right here at the station, and it's a little sign, and it says, I'm really easy to get along with once you learn to see things my way. So Sarah's going to be talking about that, just that kind of stuff. And so, Victory Chicks and you guys, we haven't talked for a while, and I have a bunch of stuff to tell you, including the psychic thing that happened on my summer vacation that might have saved my life. And then I came back to news, and there's the bombing in London, North Korea, crazy stuff. It's like the world's going to hell in a handbasket. But what I want to talk with you about today is apple pie. I know, that's a little odd, but I'll explain. First of all, you should know, I make apple pie, and it's really good. Secondly, you might remember that I have two close friends, Maria and Angela, who are in the Maggio family. Ricotta cheese, mozzarella. Well, their grandfather, Maria and Angela's grandfather, started the Maggio company, and he had 4 kids, 3 sons and a daughter. One of those sons was Salvatore. My friends Maria and Angela are his daughters, and because that's how I met Sal, their father. And he's the reason I make apple pie. Now, you would think, in the best Italian, I'd be telling you about cannoli or babbarums or making ricotta cheese, because Sal made excellent ricotta cheese, or something, but no, it's apple pie. And here's why. When I would visit the Maggios for the holidays, they would have cannolis and other Italian goodies from Isgro's Bakery in South Philly. And biscottis. Maria and Angela make the best biscottis I have ever had, ever. But it's the only thing they bake. They're great cooks, but they're not bakers. So when I would go for dinner, and, I have to bring something, I'd offer to bring dessert other than cannoli, like cookies or brownies or, something. Then one year, Sally asked me to bring an apple pie. And that surprised me. Apple pie. But, that was easy because, you buy apple pies, right? Although when I was a kid and we had apple trees in our backyard in Havertown, we had tons of apples in the fall, and my mother would make different apple things every night. And not just pie. If she made a pie, that was like no big deal. She made other stuff that was really good. But, of course, my mother, my stay-at-home mom, made dinner every day and often baked a dessert. And in the fall, it was almost always something with apples. But if you're like me and you work outside the home, and even if you don't, who does that? Who bakes these like that these days? Well, maybe you do. Well, generally speaking, I don't. So when Sal asked, it's probably 10, 15 years ago, Sal asked for an apple pie. Of course, I would bring him one. And because I wanted to bring the best, I would order it at the Highland Orchard because they were special, and Sal liked it. At least I thought he liked it. Turns out he didn't like it as much as I thought. Because one year, Sal said, Annmarie, can't you make me an apple pie? And I thought, what, make an apple, like in my kitchen, make one in my kitchen? But how could I say no to Sal? It would have been like saying no to my father. Okay, it would have been harder than saying no to my father. I said no to my father a lot. So anyway, the next time I went there for dinner, before I did, I checked with my good girlfriend Google, and she introduced me to her friend Martha Stewart, who gave me a good recipe and great tips for making apple pie. And that year I did it, and I nervously brought my first homemade apple pie for Sal. And he loved it, and I was happy. However, it wasn't until my mother died and I inherited her 1950 Betty Crocker cookbook that I hit the big time. I have no idea how Betty's recipe was so different from Martha's. It's apple, sugar, butter. How could it be different? But it was. In fact, it was so different that I wasn't even sure it was dark. I didn't even know if I made it right. But when I brought my 1950 Betty Crocker cookbook recipe apple pie recipe to Sal, I knew I'd hit pay dirt. The look on his face was worth the effort because he was so excited. And after that, every time I brought an apple pie for dessert, I almost always made an extra one just for Sal so he could have it at night for dessert. So these days, when I'm standing in line at Produce Junction, I look over at the shelf of apples and I see the Granny Smiths. I always think of Sal, and I see that look on his face, and it makes me happy to remember. And that's why I make apple pies, which I'll be doing soon, but not for Sal. In July, Sal died just a few months after his spouse, Grace. And the memorial service is tomorrow in South Philadelphia. The interment's at Holy Cross in Yaden, and which of course is where all Italians are buried. And the luncheon then is back in South Philadelphia, and it'll probably wrap up like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then Maria wants me to join her at her father's favorite restaurant, Dante and Luigi's in South Philly. Now, Maria said she isn't sure anybody else would be up for it, but I can't pass up Dante and Luigi's. Have you ever been there? They make the best veal percatelli. It's their signature dish, and it's awesome, and I'm sure I've talked about it before. Well, Dante and Luigi's was the last place Joseph and I went with Maria's parents before they moved to New Mexico a couple of years ago. And at Dante and Luigi's, Sal and Grace were treated like royalty, and when we were with them, so were we, which was fun. Except now when Joseph and I go on our own, and the service is, it's okay. But with Sal and Grace, it was special. So thinking about Dante and Luigi's reminded me of my mother. When Marie and I were both single, we used to have dinner like every other month, and we'd take turns. And when it was her turn, we would go to Dante and Luigi's. When my mother found out, she freaked out. Not that I was so much that I was going to South Philly, but that I was going to Dante and Luigi's. And she would say, Sant'Antonia, which was my mom's Italian for St. Anthony. Sant'Antonia, you're going to get shot. And I would laugh and I would say, Mom, come on. That kind of thing happened in your time, not mine. But guess what? Not too long after Joseph and I got married the first time, somebody did get shot there. You might remember it was Nicky Scarfo. He was shot at Dante and Luigi's in 1989. And Scarfo survived, but my mother did not miss the opportunity to say, "See, Annmarie, I told you could have been shot." Of course, there was like one little glitch that in my mother's admonition. Was not in the mob, never dated anybody in the mob. And in fact, the Maggio family might be the closest I've ever come to the mob. And honestly, Maria and I, in all these years, never even talked about any of those family connections. She never said, and I never asked, so for all I know, there weren't any. Well, okay, maybe I thought about it, but only recently after talking to author George Anastasia, who you might recognize his name. He wrote about the mob in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Well, George and I sat next to each other at an author signing event, and he told me something about the charming woman I always knew as Maria's Aunt Lena. She was married to Sal's brother, Peter, and Lena's brother was Angelo Bruno. Now, according to George, it was Aunt Lena who got Angelo his entree into the mob through Peter. You know, but Victory Chicks and you guys, if you would have met Aunt Lena, you would have wondered if all that was true the way I did. Because Lena was a psychologist who was soft-spoken and mild-mannered. And you would never have guessed that Dr. Lena was anything but a mainline businesswoman. Because she was. She just had a funky brother. Well, a lot of us have one of those, right? So who knows? Lena died recently, too, and she's probably getting a kick out of hearing me talk about her. But speaking of funky brothers, maybe that is who is the difficult person in your life. If it's not your brother, who is? A neighbor? Another family member? Somebody at work? Well, let's see what Sarah Elliston has to say. She's an expert on dealing with difficult people because she says she was one. Sarah's a former teacher and for years was a volunteer coordinator with the United Way, and now she gives workshops on things like values realization and, of course, dealing with difficult people. So listen, go get some good happy hour, something to drink, and come back with me and Sarah Elliston. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Remember when you wished you had more time for yourself? And now you have it, but you notice you're keeping busy with stuff, but that stuff isn't making you feel happy or filled up? And when you think about what would make you happy and filled up, you get stuck or feel overwhelmed. And then you go back to what's more familiar, more comfortable, even if it's not making you happy. Wouldn't you love to find a way to start making sense of that deep discontent you're feeling? Well, you're not alone. I'm Annmarie Kelly, author, victory strategist, and the radio show host of the Friday Happy Hour. And I know there's a place for you, one that other women have found to be both inspirational and empowering. And it's the Victorious Woman Project. Go there now and get on my mailing list, where you'll be the first to know about my upcoming online workshops, teleseminars, and more. And while you're there, take a couple minutes to look over my blog. You can download some of the free stuff I have for you and let it get your creative juices going. I'm looking forward to meeting you at the Victorious Woman Project. And that's at www.victoriouswoman.com.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm Annmarie Kelly, and I'm here with recovering difficult person Sarah Elliston. And Sarah, I'm glad you're here today.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, I'm glad. Sarah, in the couple interactions that we've had for today's show, I haven't found you to be difficult at all. But you say you were. So what made you a difficult person?
Well, I think if you lived with me 24 hours a day, you'd probably find that I still am, there's difficult things about me.
But Sarah, you could say that about anybody, couldn't you?
I think all of us have difficult people in our lives. For me, it seemed that I have gone through life mostly in a defensive mode. I was thinking about it this morning. I'm a Scorpio, and so I was born with a lot of energy and activity. And my older sister was the opposite. She's very placid and very quiet, and so we didn't get along very well. And then
I'm curious, what was her astrological sign?
She's September. She's like right now, 23rd.
Oh, Libra.
Libra. And it's funny because I married a Libra and we got along just fine, but he wasn't trying to change me. And as adults, when I've talked to my older sister about it, she said that honestly she could tell that I was unhappy, and so she was telling me what to do so I would be happy. You need to do this for Mommy or do that, and my reaction was, don't tell me what to do. And that's
very
kind
Scorpio.
of my attitude most of my
very
life.
Scorpio, Sarah.
Very Scorpio, yes. But then I think because I had, friends, and I was smart. I did okay in school. I just developed this sort of habit of always, not really respecting authority and pushing back whenever possible. And sometimes I think that I went through life like a boxer, with my fists up, just ready. And that's the only thing I can think of, at least in terms of childhood, and it was my perception that people were against me and that I didn't really belong in my family. I had a younger sister, and she and my older sister played together beautifully. I was sort of like out there in left field. And when we talked about it again with my younger sister, when I've talked to her about it, she said, "Oh, yes, we bullied you. Yes, we did." And I said, "Well, why did you collude?" And she said, "Are you kidding? I didn't want to get hurt. I wasn't ever physically hurt, but I didn't want to get bullied." She said, "I could see where the power was," and she and I have really reconciled quite. We're pretty good friends. My older sister and I are polite with each other, and I think we care for each other, but we're not close.
So Sarah, are there like some commonality? Like if you were going to profile a difficult person, yourself or anybody else who we might call a difficult person, if you were going to profile them, like what would you say are typical behaviors?
They always have to be right. They usually, a difficult person, if you think of the ones in your life right now, everybody's got at least one, and I always talk about it as there's always someone in your life that you just cheerfully like to strangle, and they push some button for you, and you have to work with them or live with them, or they're their next door neighbor or somebody's in-law, so you bump into them a lot, and needing to be right, usually they have characteristics of being negative and critical and judgmental. We call them controlling sometimes, as they're always wanting to make sure they have it their way. Often a difficult person is someone who holds grudges. I think most difficult people are pretty self-absorbed, but I think most of us are self-absorbed. It's not like if you're listening and you think, "Oh dear, I'm self-absorbed, I must be difficult." That's not necessarily true, but a difficult person isn't always aware of how their behavior is impacting someone else. They may notice that someone is reacting to what they're saying, but they know what they're saying is right or correct, and so the other person must have a problem.
I know. You know what, Sarah? I know exactly. I'm thinking of like at least one person right now. But you say that difficult people are clueless. They don't really even know they're annoying the crap out of somebody. And I sometimes I wonder if the difficult person just does it because they want to be annoying and they do it on purpose that's how they get their jollies. But you say that's not true, huh?
It's really not true. No, it's a habit, and they honestly aren't aware. I was doing a workshop recently, and there was a teacher in the group, and she said, "Are you kidding?" And I wasn't sure if she was talking about kids in her classroom or some of the parents or other teachers that she bumped into. She said, "They know they're doing it." They really don't. They are continuing to do a behavior because no one's ever said, "Hey, when you do that, the rest of us want to kill you." And the consequence of continuing to do it isn't as strong as the ability to change. Does that make sense?
Wait, say that again. The consequence of
continuing to do it. In other words, if you keep doing this, you'll get fired. That's one thing. But if it's a family thing or a team, we work as a team, you keep doing it, it drives us crazy. We all just want to throw up our hands and walk away from this team, and we're all going to flunk or whatever the outcome is. If the difficult person doesn't think that consequence is important or as important as being right, then they may not change. But they will become more aware of what they're doing because they'll either flunk or get fired or, divorced or whatever. because someone finally says, I can't stand it when you do this. The reason I wrote the book is because having been a difficult person and knowing that I still have those tendencies, I feel for the distance that we have, us difficult people. Even though we have friends and we think we're connected, we might be married and have children, there are few moments where we feel really bonded with others. There's always something in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to put your finger on it, and we usually, if they're anything like me, say, oh, there's something wrong with me. And there may be something wrong with you, but if nobody's told you what your behavior is, that when you argue with your boss, they want you to, they want you to go.
Mm.
And that's simple. But when one of my friends said to me once, you're always angry. How come you're always getting mad at people? And I thought, really? And just recently, I was chopping fruit with a friend. We were serving the food at church, on Sunday morning, and we were preparing the fruit. And I said something like, "Oh, I just hate doing apples. They're so hard. I just hate doing them." And then a few minutes later, I said something about hating doing something. She said, "What's going on with you? Suddenly you're hating everything." And I thought, But because
and that was really nice that she said it, because you didn't realize you were doing it.
I didn't.
Yeah.
But because I wrote the book and she's read it and we're friends, that she has permission, as far as I'm concerned, to point that out to me.
Mm.
And I did. I sort of walked myself through the day saying, so what are we really mad at here? Because it's just, I think chopping up apples is difficult, even when you use those little gizmos that you can buy and push through the apple. It still is hard.
Did you hear me talking about making apple pie? Were you here when I...
No, I wasn't there. Did you talk about it?
Yeah, I did. It was, yeah, I made it for my girlfriend's. I used to make it for my girlfriend's father. And you're absolutely right. The pie is not like a big deal, but slicing those apples for pie...
It's a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
But the point is that I probably said things like that all my life, and nobody called me on it. And when I was 50 before I realized that I was driving people crazy.
I know. I was reading that, and I thought, wow, if Sarah can get to 50 and still change, I think anybody can. Do you agree?
Well, this is hope. Yes. Well, who knows if I've really changed, but I certainly understand it, and we teach what we need to learn.
I get that. Yeah. Well, but Sarah, I was struck by a conversation you had. You and your mother had a difficult relationship. And,
yeah, we did.
And then when after your father passed and your mother was in a retirement community, you visited her and you were shocked by her difficult person stuff. And then you left and called your son. Could you?
Yeah, I called my son. When I was 50, it was my boss pointing out that I was having a little mini temper tantrum and driving everyone crazy in our small working group. That was my first kind of like, oh, really? Do I do that? And then when I observed my mother doing the same thing.
It all came home.
That's when I was like, because what I had been saying to myself was, how come nobody told me not to do this? This is so weird. Why didn't someone tell me?
Yeah.
Well, obviously my mother couldn't tell me not to because that's what she did.
But
she never did it in public.
But your son told you that they just walked around.
Yeah, he said he and his dad they sort of got used to it because I would blow up and 5 minutes later it was over. One of my bosses told me I was an extroverted thinker. So, on the Myers-Briggs, I think out loud, and so when I'm really upset, that comes out just as other thoughts come out. And I have had to be real conscious. It's the same woman that pointed out that I was having a little mini tantrum and needed to stop. She was the one, she did Myers-Briggs training, and I backed her up. I was her second in command for a year, and she pointed out to me that I was an extroverted thinker, and so I say the first thing that comes out of my mouth. Other people have 4 or 5 thoughts before they speak. And it really helped me to realize that I didn't have to say it, even though I was thinking it.
Oh, yeah, but you could put a little filter in there.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what my son experienced, and my husband did too, was that when I was really upset about something, because of my because I felt, the way I grew up, I felt like the only way I could get heard was if I, had a little tantrum, screamed and yelled, and just was unpleasant enough so that people did what I wanted, or at least gave me what I wanted for the most part. That I kind of did that in my adult life, at least with my husband and my son. And they just learned to kind of like, okay, Mom's having her little whatever, and I would get over it. And I remember saying to my husband once, "Why don't you stop me?" And he said, "Oh, well, you'll be done in a minute," or something.
Wow.
It wasn't intended to be discounting it, but it felt like it to me. But I was taking everything personally in those days. I was expecting someone else to fix me. So.
Well, Sarah, we have to go for a break, but when we come back, okay. I want to know how we can figure out if we're the difficult person, and if we're not, how we can deal with that difficult person. So everybody hang tight, and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Hi, this is Annmarie Kelly, author, victory strategist, and the radio show host of the Friday Happy Hour. I trust you're enjoying my conversation with this fabulous, victorious woman. If you're getting inspired with ideas and feeling empowered, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's more for you. Tips, downloads, resources at the Victorious Woman Project. Go to victoriouswoman.com and look around and get on my mailing list so you can be the first to know about the newest good things I have for you. That's www.victoriouswoman.com.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm Annmarie Kelly, and we're here with Sarah Elliston. And Sarah, we're talking about dealing with difficult people, and there's two things I want to talk about with you now. The first is if difficult people are clueless, how can I find out if I'm a difficult person? And then the other thing is, if I'm not the difficult person, but my neighbor is, or my spouse, or my coworker, then what do I do with that person? So let's start with the self-reflection one. So,
well, you might be a difficult person. There are a lot of different characteristics. I mentioned some of them. If you feel like you're on the defensive a good deal, or your relationships are estranged, if you have relationships in your life where you really aren't talking to that person ever, and I'm stunned by the numbers of families where that happens. And it doesn't mean that the other person isn't just as difficult, but if we absolutely refuse to find a way to connect with the people that are important to us, then that may be an indication. If you find you're complaining a lot, or there's never enough, or you're angry and that anger is justified, if you find that you need to confront other people, that it's important to tell them what you think and what you think about them, and,
like
that's
judgmentally.
Never very popular.
It's sort of like judgmentally, right?
Yeah. And critical. If you feel like you're isolated and you argue a lot, any one of those is just a hint. I was thinking about it during the break, and most of those behaviors, I think, come from fear. And
I could see that.
Yeah, a fear and it's so simple, fear that others don't like us, or that we won't be safe in some way. And yet, for someone who's, 50, 60 years old, and you say that's something based on fear, oh, heavens no, I've been doing this all my life, blah, 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 blah. And it's not something we particularly acknowledge, but it is something for you to look at, we can look at in ourselves to see if that actually is true. This is why do I keep arguing with this person when I know I'm not going to change their mind? What am I afraid of is a question to ask.
Is it possible to be a difficult person with just one other person? You've probably seen this before, where like let's say a couple, and one of the the one person is, you just think they are salt of the earth, nicest person, calm, cool, collected, and then you find out from their spouse that they're a bear to live with.
Yeah.
Is it possible to be a difficult person with just one other person?
I don't know how to answer that. I think what you're describing is that the persona that your bear, if you will, puts on with the world is not the same as how that person is in intimacy. In an intimate relationship, he's a bear. He or she is a bear to live with, and so you can not find them difficult. But my other experience is that you probably don't feel there isn't a real closeness there. There's some distance because that person can't be close to you because they're not really being themselves. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm just curious because sometimes, but you know what I'm talking about. You know somebody and you just think that they're as sweet as can be, and then you find out, or maybe it's.
Well, my mother was like that. Everyone she knew loved her, and it used to drive me bats when I went to the retirement community because all the other women, mostly women there, but some men too, they just thought she was really, really wonderful. And yet with us, with the people, her daughters whom she felt close to, she would rage at us and to us about how unfair it was that my father had died, and she let herself feel all of her pain with us. We had to really take a deep breath and say, this is Mom feeling pain, this isn't personal. And that's kind of where you have to go when you want to have a conversation with a difficult person. I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, but you know what? Yes, but Sarah, that's very interesting. That if you look at the rage from a difficult person as them being either fearful or in pain, that's a way of opening up a dialogue, isn't it?
Well, at least in your head. I'm not sure you want to say to them, gee, I can tell you're feeling pain or you're afraid. They won't get that necessarily, unless it's a close friend. But the first step, if you do have someone that you find difficult, that you have a consequence for. In other words, if their behavior, the first thing you have to do is kind of look at the way you're looking at them. See, the only thing the world gives us is information. It's how we receive it that makes it good or bad or happy or sad. So the very first step is, how are we looking at this person? Are we labeling them difficult? Have we put all these judgmental words on them so that we always get an emotional reaction when we hear their name or see them? That's really the first step. It's kind of like, wait a minute, what exactly is the person doing? And what's the impact of what they do? And you have to describe what they're doing in words that are non-judgmental, which is not something we're trained to do. Our world tells us to use terms like controlling and manipulative and you name it. There's a whole long list of words that are usually used to describe someone's character, and it's really not. It's those words describe our emotional reaction to what they're doing. So that takes a minute to get used to.
Yeah, so it would be like when you start banging the wall or when you start shuffling papers or when you raise your stuff like that. Is that what you mean?
Okay, yes, exactly. So, for example, it would have been nice if the very first person I worked for had said to me, when you ask questions using that tone of voice, and I'd say, I don't know what you're talking about, that person could say, the next time you do it, I'll tell you. Because I want you to know that when you ask questions that way, I feel put on the spot. And you may not be intending it that way, but that's the way it feels. One of the things I had to learn was because of my education, my background, my personality, genetics, whatever, others found me intimidating. When I asked questions in staff meetings or in group events, people were intimidated. One of my friends told me that when I come to her classes, she likes me to come to her classes. I'm not confronting her. She said, when you start to talk, people really listen. And I think when I was being a little more strident, without knowing that I was being that way, it found it it was threatening to some of the people I worked for. And if one of them could have said to me way back when I was 30 years old, when you ask questions that way, it makes everybody feel anxious and defensive. And I know I would have said, I don't know what you're talking about. And if she'd been the perfect boss, she would have said, the next time you do it, I'll tell you. And then you can think about what kind of tone did you use. I do remember somewhere along the line realizing that I talked to the CEO as if I was an equal. And then I justified myself because we were talking about something that I really knew a whole lot about, and I did feel like his equal, but I wasn't. And I'm sure he found it very difficult. Anyway, so that's the first step is identifying their behavior.
But I like that because if you told me when you do X, whatever it is, and I said, I don't do that. I don't even know what you're talking about. And you said, well, if the next time you do it, I'll let you know. And I say, that's okay. Then I'm giving you my permission to just make me aware of that, like to call me out on my stuff.
Yeah, and the next piece of it is, of course, especially for family members, is to say, when you do it, I don't want to be around you, or my kids don't want to be around you, or it makes me really, I've had to say this to one of my friends, it makes me really wonder if I want to be close friends with you anymore, because I don't know what's going to come. I'm confused in your reactions. And seems like we're always arguing, and all I'm trying to do is listen. So the impact of the behavior is important. So, for my boss, when I was having this temper tantrum and trying to find my glasses, and she said, we can't get our work done. She talked about negative energy, which I'd never heard of, but I began to realize what she was talking about, especially about 5 years later. I was in a different position, and I had to share an office with a guy, and he did exactly the same thing. He got really frustrated about a process he was doing, and he was throwing papers around and muttering under his breath and doing all these things, and I thought to myself, okay, God, I get it. This is exactly what I was doing. So I wasn't about to confront him on it. I just laughed.
Well, there's a point, and we need to go to a break, Sarah. But when I come back, there's a point of, and I think this happens with a lot of women, where you don't know if you're being difficult or right. And you had that experience, and I've had that experience. I'm sure so many of my listeners have. So let's talk about that as soon as we get back. And everybody hang in there with me. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Are you one of those women who lived the first part of your life as a really good girl? That is, you did all the right things and followed all the so-called rules for women? I was like that too. But have you noticed that once you passed 40, you have less patience for those rules? Maybe you even think that the rules really don't make sense for you anymore. Maybe they never did and you just didn't realize it. Do you want to go where other recovering good girls meet to inspire each other and support their new empowered selves? Then join me, Annmarie Kelly, and some very fabulous Victorious Women. We're on Facebook at the Victorious Woman Project. So go to facebook.com/Victorious Woman Project. I'll talk to you there.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm Annmarie Kelly. I'm here with Sarah Elliston. And Sarah, here's the thing. I don't think anybody would think I'm a difficult person. Well, except maybe the owner of the plumbing and heating company that did my air conditioning and heating last year. He wouldn't even talk to me when I complained about his company's service. And he told me, you'll love this, he said, have your husband call me. So, and probably because I wasn't buying the crap he was telling me. And, it's Sarah, if you want to push my buttons and incur my wrath for always, that'll do it. And you had a similar kind of experience with contractors when you were putting in a second bathroom.
That's right. Yeah, it was really fascinating. A really quick story is that we were going to put the bathtub under the window, and then when that's the way the bathroom was designed. And then when they actually got around to doing it, they discovered that there were pipes going under the window, and that since we were going to just do a unit that you just sets in with top and walls and bathtub all in one piece, fiberglass piece, that they couldn't put that there. So they decided to move the tub, excuse me, let's see. What did they decide? Oh, they decided they couldn't do a window. I'd forgotten all the details. But the upshot was that they couldn't do the window. And I said, no. This is going to be a fairly large bathroom, and we needed a window in it. And they said, no, we can't. It's too expensive. And my husband was agreeing with them. It was too expensive. And yes,
and that
I was
probably
right.
made you crazy, huh?
I beg your pardon?
That he was agreeing, that your spouse was agreeing with him, probably made you crazy.
Yeah, it's funny, because when I was writing the book, there were like 2 or 3 other times that this happened with my husband where he disagreed with me and I had a tantrum, and it turned out that I was right. But I couldn't remember them, so it's probably just as well. So this is the only one that got into the book. But I ended up almost having to lie on the floor and kick and scream. I mean, I really got nasty about the fact that, wait a minute, this is part of the money that was going for this was mine, and I had an equal voice. And anybody who has ever, lived with a child and more than one person in the house knows that if you can have a window in the bathroom, you put the window in the bathroom. Mm-hmm. At the very least, you're going to be able to open it when you need to. Mm-hmm. And it was just absurd, and that they, as contractors, should have known better. And it's their job to figure it out. And as it turned out, they were able to put the tub on the side, and along the wall where we did end up with a window, over the pipes, they put a beautiful little wooden bench. I mean, they just covered it up with wood. Mm-hmm. And it was beautiful because the hot water went through it. And so when we took a small person out of the tub, we can plop him right there, and it was warm in the winter. And it was, we were glad it was there. And my husband acknowledged later that I was right. But a lot of it was sexism, I'm sure, and also because I was prepared to spend more money than my husband ever was. Every time it came up to a choice of this or this, I always seemed to want the more expensive whatever it was. And so, he wanted to save money, and they were saying, well, look, this is the logical thing. I said, no, you don't understand. And I really did have to be very difficult and be almost insulting, and I don't know how much it changed. We were friends with the contractor. I mean, he was an architect and a contractor, and we were personal friends. We used to go to dinner at their house or not. I'm not sure how much we did that afterwards. It may have colored. There were other reasons, of course, but it just was. I think part of it was I knew it was because I was a woman, that they were doing that.
And that happens. I think that happens a lot. And I think women, they get that difficult person tag, and it's not that. I think. So I guess the question I want to ask you, Sarah, is what's the difference between speaking up for what's important and right and being difficult? And is that a point of perception?
I think calling someone difficult is always a point of perception. And speaking up for what is right, the more we practice it in a diplomatic way, maybe the better we get at it, but we will always be perceived as difficult by men. That's my experience. I mean, look at Congress, for goodness sakes. I can't remember her name, but the head of the Democratic Party,
Nancy Pelosi?
Wasn't it she in a meeting in the White House? She was the only woman there, and every time she tried to talk, they would talk over her.
Oh.
She finally had to say, hey, can't a woman talk in the White House? Mm-hmm. And they all got really quiet. Now, that's kind of difficult. That's kind of a confrontive question. But what else? I mean, eventually, in theory, they were all respecting each other, but they don't really. And I'm not a man-hater. I just think our culture has taught us that men are, in charge, and they have learned that with their spouses anyway, you typically say, yes, dear, you're right, dear, whatever you want, dear, just to keep the peace. but it's not always equal. And in the work world, I mean, look at Google now is being sued for discriminating against women. So I think it's an uphill battle. And the more diplomatic we can become, and that's one of the reasons I wrote the book too, is to help people go through a process so that when I wish she could have found another way to say to them, hey guys, it's my turn.
And I've heard that, and I like what you had to say, that if you find a diplomatic way, and I think it's a diplomatic way of saying it, and at the same time being persistent.
Absolutely.
I think that combination, and as she said, like you almost had to lay on the floor and throw a tantrum. Well, you don't want to get to that point, but I think that if you are persistent, and I know that with my own spouse, that if I just keep saying it and saying it and saying it and saying it, and something happened while we were on vacation, and I said, I just feel there's something wrong with the car, and I just kept saying it. I didn't say it to be miserable, or I didn't say it in an unpleasant way. I just said there's something. I really feel there's something wrong with the car, but I just kept saying it persistently, a couple times a day. So
did it turn out that there was something wrong?
Yes.
Yeah. It's marriage, relationships. They're kind of a dance anyway. So who knows what's going on in a man's head when the woman says, gee, there's something wrong with the car. Some men know that their wife knows the car better than they do. Others may not. The diplomatic part, part of the reason I wrote the book and that I would encourage people to do is to take the emotion out of it, so they could. I don't know what Nancy Pelosi could have said as sort of like, if you men keep talking, am I ever going to get a turn? I don't know if that would have been any better. I'm not sure there would have been anything better. But ideally, that one would be able to say, when you're doing this, it has this impact. And do you know you're doing it? A lot of times men don't realize they interrupt all the time. Of course, the other thing is that with a situation like that...
Sarah, I want to stop you right there. I think that's really true. I think a lot of times when we're talking to somebody, and it's not specifically the men in our lives, but just anybody, that they just don't realize it. But
the other thing is that the best way to confront that kind of thing is to have a conversation, and that usually has to be done in private. So to say to your colleagues privately, not in front of the whole White House staff or all the people, that were at that meeting, to be able to say, when you keep interrupting me, I feel like you don't respect me, and it makes it a lot harder for me to work with you. Do you know you do it? I don't think they know they do it.
Yeah, and I think at home, it's if you're with somebody who, whether it's a family member, your spouse, or even your kids, and if they're not aware of it, and you make them aware of it, and say, it makes me feel like crap when you do that, then, I think that probably, and you talk about that in your book.
It helps a little. I think feeling like crap needs to be probably described even more clearly, because as the kids get older, they don't care how we feel.
Oh, that part's true.
I remember saying to my son when he was acting very weird, he had kids over and he was being very sort of teenager-y. I invited him to another room and I said, are you doing that and being rude to me on purpose? Are you talking back and being sarcastic because you've forgotten that I really hate it? Or are you doing it because you think it makes you look big in front of your friends? Help me out here. I don't know how to respond to you.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be helpful. One thing I did want to say, I jotted it down when you say, do we know whether we're being difficult or whether we're right? The question I think that I would have to ask myself is, how important is it? And is the way you're doing it now working? I mean, that bathroom window was pretty bloody important. But there were a lot of other things that I didn't need to push so hard on. They weren't as important to the window. So
you kind of have to be fair. I mean, if it's really important, then you keep pushing, and if it isn't,
yeah.
Good
Yeah.
stuff, Sarah. We have to go, but
I know. I'm sorry.
But tell my listeners how they can get more of you.
Well, if you want more information, you can go to my website, sarahelliston.com. Sarah has an H, SARAHELLISTON. Or if you're interested in the book, you can buy it on my website. It'll take you straight to Amazon, or you can go to Amazon and look for Lessons from a Difficult Person. Or you can just type my name in and the book will come up.
And Sarah, your website is also on the radio wrap-up at victoriouswoman.com.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so have a great weekend. Thanks for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And you too, Victory Chicks and you guys. And listen, don't forget, the Restaurant Festival is here in town this Sunday. You know, that annual block party on Gay Street is always fun. And if you love country music and you don't want to, and you want to get out of town, North Wildwood has a Boots on the Beach festival. And if you're a Civil War buff, you can go to Cold Spring Village in Cape May. And I put links to all of those on today's website on the radio wrap-up at victoriouswoman.com. And, I hope to do the festival myself on Sunday, but I'm going out with friends tonight and then doing the funeral thing all day tomorrow. So I could be fizzled out by Sunday. But if the weather's nice, maybe I'll see you out here on Gay Street. I have thanks for coming today. Come back next Friday. I'll leave you with this thought from Jane Austen. Apple pies are a considerable part of our domestic happiness. I buy that, don't you? No, don't buy it. Make it. Now that you have a little craving. So go get yourself some apple pie today. Have a victorious weekend. See you next week. Chenzan.
Thanks for listening to this Friday Happy Hour. Make sure you subscribe, rate and review today's show. And join us again next week for the Friday Happy Hour with Annmarie Kelly.